Okay, Tom Ford. A Hood Eloquence presentation. All rights reserved. Part 1. The compliment that changed everything. The most dangerous thing a woman can do is see a man clearly and tell him so. Chapter 1. Okay, Tom Ford. Jacksonville, Florida. First Friday in May. The kind of morning that made the whole Gulf Coast feel like it had been iron smooth and set out special. Kendra Mitchell walked like the sidewalk was a runway, not because she was trying to, but because 45 minutes of lock maintenance and a dress the color of a Haitian sunset demanded nothing less. The fabric, her own design, burnt orange bleeding into violet bleeding into the green of shallow Caribbean water, moved with her the way good fabric always moves with the woman who made it. Like it knew. She had a jerk chicken wrap from Cherry's Cafe in her left hand and 15 minutes left on her lunch break and absolutely nowhere better to be than exactly here, on Adams Street. In the thick and salt-sweet Florida air with music coming from somewhere and the city going about its beautiful, chaotic business around her. She almost missed him. Almost. He was crossing the street on the opposite corner, this man, this ridiculous, unnecessary, utterly uncalled for man, in a suit so precisely cut it might have been stitched directly onto his body by someone who studied his shoulders as a religious act. Navy. Slim. Single-breasted with a pocket square the exact color of raw cream. His shoes were Cognac Oxford brogues, hand-finished unless she had completely lost the eye she had been sharpening since her first Fashion Institute class at 19. A watch on his left wrist caught the sun for just a moment, and she clocked it, a Cartier Santos. Not showing off. Wearing it like a man who forgot he had it on. She stopped walking. The wrap paused halfway to her mouth. She was a clothing designer. She had spent her entire adult life reading bodies and the stories fabric tells about them. And this man, this copper-toned, broad-shouldered, 6-foot fact of a human being, was a full chapter. He was talking to someone beside him, a younger man in a gray suit carrying a leather folio, walking with the focused energy of someone whose salary depended on keeping pace. The man in the navy suit had one hand in his pocket. Unhurried. Like the whole city could wait. Kendra Mitchell had never in her life hollered at a man across the street. This was about to be a first. Okay, Tom Ford. She heard herself before she fully decided to say it. The words came up from the same place her best designs came from, the gut, the instinct, the part of her that had never once listened to the part of her that said be careful. Her voice carried. It always carried. Daddy used to say she came out of the womb announcing herself. The man in the navy suit slowed. Turned. Found her. She was grinning before she knew she was grinning, that full, wide, take-it-or-leave-it smile that Shannon always said was either her best feature or her most dangerous one depending on who was receiving it. Her locks swung forward as she leaned into a little bow, one hand pressed to her heart in exaggerated tribute, the other still holding the wrap. You are wearing that suit, baby, she called. Lord have mercy, somebody's mama raised them right. A beat. Then he smiled. And Kendra Mitchell, 30 years old, clothing designer, woman who had navigated the sharp and gorgeous mess of her own life entirely on her own terms, felt it in her chest like the first note of a song she didn't know she'd been waiting to hear. It was that kind of smile. Slow to arrive. Complete when it got there. He said something to the man beside him. The younger man with the folio glanced across the street at her, looked back at his employer, and whatever he saw on that face made him straighten slightly, like a man recalibrating. Kendrick Thompson had been awake since 4:45. Not because he had to be. He'd stopped needing alarm clocks somewhere around 27, when the mind that ran Thompson Capital Advisors learned to simply not allow itself the luxury of sleeping past the day. By 5 he'd been in the gym on the 4th floor of his Riverside condo. By 7 he'd cleared 43 emails. By 8:15 he'd reviewed the full contract brief for the Morrow Group acquisition, $10 million in advisory fees, 18 months of negotiation, a meeting in 2 hours at a conference room on the 32nd floor of a building 3 blocks from here. He was supposed to be thinking about the Morrow Group. He was not thinking about the Morrow Group. He was thinking about the woman in the sunset dress who had just called him Tom Ford from across the street and was grinning at him like she'd given him a gift she wasn't even sure he deserved yet. She had locks that reached her shoulders, thick and full, the ends dipped in what looked like gold. The dress was extraordinary, he'd noticed that first, before the face, the way a man who'd grown up watching his mother appreciate beautiful made things always noticed the craft before the catalog. The dress moved like it was alive. She moved like she knew it. Her smile, though. He'd been smiled at a lot in his life. Women smiled at Kendrick Thompson with calculation, with want, with performance. This woman smiled at him the way you smile at something that genuinely pleases you, simple, direct, without agenda. Like she was doing him a favor and expected nothing back for it. That was new. Sir. Jordan's voice beside him was carefully neutral. Jordan Williams had been his assistant for 4 years and had developed a specific tone for moments like this, precise, professional, and radiating the quiet awareness that something was about to change in the schedule. The Morrow meeting. Handle it. Jordan blinked. Once. Handle the $10 million. Tell Marcus I had an emergency. Send him the supplemental analysis we ran last week. Tell him I'll reschedule by end of business. He's buying Jordan. He's not going anywhere. Kendrick adjusted his pocket square and looked back across the street. She was still there, still smiling, now watching him with an expression that had shifted from pure delight into something more curious, like she was wondering what he was going to do. That meeting can wait. She cannot. Jordan followed his gaze. Looked at the woman. Looked back at Kendrick. And in 4 years of working for this man, across 17 countries and 3 corporate acquisitions, and 1 absolutely catastrophic dinner in Singapore that Jordan still had nightmares about, Jordan Williams had never once seen Kendrick Thompson look at anything the way he was looking at this woman on the corner in the sunset dress. Yes, sir, Jordan said. I'll handle it. Kendrick was already stepping off the curb. She watched him cross the street toward her and thought, okay, so he's doing this. She'd expected a wave, maybe. A nod. Men who looked like that, men who moved through space like the world had been measured and adjusted to accommodate them, they appreciated the compliment and they kept walking. They had places to be. They had the whole city running on their schedule. This man was crossing the street. Toward her. She squared her shoulders and kept smiling because Kendra Mitchell did not do intimidated, but she did do impressed, and up close he was lured. The suit was even better up close. She could see now that the fabric had a very subtle texture to it, a fine herringbone that only revealed itself in direct light. His jaw was clean-shaved and his eyes were dark and clear, and he was looking at her with an expression she didn't have an immediate word for. Not predatory. Not performative. Interested. Genuinely, carefully interested. Like she was a piece of work he'd found in a gallery and couldn't quite believe the price wasn't already paid. You're a designer, he said, when he reached her. Not a question. He was looking at the dress. She raised an eyebrow. Most people lead with their name. That slow smile again. Kendrick Thompson. And yes, that was intentional. I wanted to see if you'd correct me before you told me who you were. Kendra Mitchell. She offered her free hand. And how did you know I designed it? Could be vintage. Could be something I picked up at a boutique. The seam at your right hip is compensated for your stance, he said. It's a few millimeters longer than the left to account for the way you carry your weight when you're relaxed. Nobody does that in production. That's personal work. Kendra stared at him. My mother was a tailor, he said, by way of explanation. In Savannah. I grew up watching her fit people. Brenda Thompson's alterations, she said before she could stop herself. It was a reflex, a designer's reflex, a black woman from the South's reflex. Off Drayton Street? She did the alterations on every bridesmaid dress for my cousin's wedding 5 years ago. We had to drive to Savannah because nobody in Jacksonville could match the work. Something moved across his face. Something genuine and unhidden and briefly, beautifully young. That's my mother, he said. Kendra Mitchell laughed, a real laugh, loud enough that a couple passing by glanced over and the sound of it opened up the space between them like a window. Chapter 2. Cherry's Table. Cherry Joseph had owned her cafe on Riverside Avenue for 19 years, and she had seen every variety of man and woman sit in her chairs, and she had developed the kind of instinct about people that only came from watching them eat. People showed themselves at tables. That was the truth of it. Put a person in front of food, real food, food made with attention, and they became who they actually were. She watched the couple settle into the corner booth, the big man in the beautiful suit and the designer with the sunset locks, and she picked up her order pad and told Deja at the counter, "Don't rush that table. You don't even know what they're ordering yet, Miss Cherry. Doesn't matter. Don't rush it." She nodded toward the window. Outside, a younger man in a gray suit sat at one of the sidewalk tables with his folio open and his phone to his ear, managing something with the focused efficiency of someone buying his boss time. Somebody's making space for something. We're going to respect that. Deja followed her gaze. Oh, he's Miss Cherry. That man in there is fine. And she doesn't even look nervous. No, Cherry said, watching Kendra lean forward and say something that made Kendrick Thompson tip his head back and laugh. That's the thing about her, isn't it? They sat for 2 hours. Kendra's lunch break had technically ended 40 minutes in. She texted her assistant Marcus, not the same Marcus as Kendrick's meeting, she would realize later, though Jacksonville was small enough that she'd wonder. And told him she'd be back for the 3 o'clock fitting and not to let the Hendersons move anything in the studio. Then she put her phone face down and gave this man her full attention, because that's what the moment asked for. He was easy to talk to in a way she hadn't expected. Big men in expensive suits had a tendency toward either performance or interrogation, performing their success like a one-man show, or treating conversation like a deposition. Kendrick Thompson did neither. He asked questions that were actually curious. He answered questions completely, without the politician's habit of saying a lot while revealing nothing. What made you stay in Jacksonville? He asked. If you're doing what I think you're doing at your level, you've had offers. New York twice. Miami once. She swirled the last of her hibiscus tea. My parents are here. My studio is here. Shannon's here, my best friend. She'd actually kill me, not figuratively. And she paused, looking at the window, the dappled Florida light coming through and landing warm on the tablecloth. I don't want to make clothes for the city that already has everything. I want to dress the people that city forgot to invite. He was quiet for a moment. Hood Eloquence, he said. She looked at him sharply. You know the brand? I know it now. He pulled out his phone, turned it toward her. He'd pulled up her website. The homepage banner, her latest lookbook, a series of 5 women in 5 different Florida neighborhoods, each in one of her pieces, each looking like exactly who they were, was open on his screen. I just searched it while you were describing the Parrot print launch. You have a real thing here, Kendra. She didn't perform modesty. She never had and wasn't about to start for a man she'd met 90 minutes ago. I know I do, she said. I just need the right doors. He set the phone on the table between them, face up, like he was leaving it there on purpose. Tell me about the doors. And she did. She told him about the boutique buyer in Miami who kept almost committing. She told him about the trunk show last fall that sold out in 4 hours and broke her website server and still didn't translate into the wholesale deal she needed. She told him about the feature that a major lifestyle magazine had dangled and then reassigned to cover a collaboration between 2 designers who already had distribution deals, as if the people who needed Kendra's clothes could wait while the industry served itself first. She didn't say any of this with bitterness. She said it with the clear-eyed precision of a woman who understood the terrain she was navigating. He listened without performing listening. That was the part she noticed. He wasn't nodding along or mirroring her energy. He was just in it. With her. His eyes didn't wander. His phone stayed face up on the table and chimed twice, and he didn't touch it. I want to see the studio, he said when she finished. She tilted her head. That's forward. It is, he agreed. I have a reason. Which is? I have a significant event in Tampa in 6 weeks, he said. Annual benefit for the Thompson Foundation. We raise funding for HBCU scholarships. 250 guests, media coverage, the kind of room where what people are wearing matters because it's photographed. He paused. I've been using a stylist in Atlanta for 3 years. She's excellent. But everything she's put me in lately feels like it belongs to someone else. Kendra looked at him steadily. You want me to dress you? I want you to dress the room, he said. Me, the foundation board members, the keynote speaker. Your work on bodies, in a room that will be covered by 3 regional publications and 1 national lifestyle outlet. He met her eyes. If you want it. She wanted it. She was not going to let him see how much she wanted it. Send me the details, she said, sliding a card across the table. It was gold-edged with her studio address and logo, a crown made of thread. I'll look at the guest list and the event brief and tell you if it's a fit. He took the card, held it for a moment, then looked up and said, with that same careful directness, I'm going to be honest with you about something else. Go ahead. He gestured between them, and somehow the gesture was both precise and entirely without presumption, was not about the event. The event is real, and the offer is real. But I walked across that street because I wanted to meet you. Not your work. You. The restaurant was warm. The ceiling fans were turning. Somewhere in the kitchen, someone was doing something with citrus that made the whole room smell like late summer. Kendra Mitchell looked at Kendrick Thompson for a long, measuring moment. I know, she said. Chapter 3. What Jordan Witnessed. Jordan Williams wrote 3 words in the notes section of the project management app where all things Kendrick Thompson were organized, labeled, and filed. This one's different. Then Jordan deleted it, because professionalism. Then Jordan typed it again, because honesty. It had been 14 months since Sharon Lee, Tampa real estate, old family money, beautiful in the way of things that are designed to look beautiful and rarely surprise you, had run her course in Kendrick's life. Sharon had lasted 11 months and had exited cleanly, as people who know how to manage optics always do, with a statement about growth and mutual respect that Jordan had not believed for a single syllable. In those 14 months, Kendrick had dated 2 women briefly and with the same restrained politeness you'd apply to a business dinner, present, cordial, and fundamentally elsewhere. Jordan had watched both fizzle from the polite distance of someone who worked too close not to see everything. This was not that. Jordan had watched Kendrick Thompson reroute his entire day, the Morrow Group, the $10 million contract, 18 months of positioning, in the time it took a woman in a colorful dress to call out a compliment from across the street. Kendrick didn't reroute. In 4 years, Jordan had watched him take a conference call from a hospital waiting room. He had reviewed quarterly reports on the tarmac of a private airstrip at midnight. He had renegotiated a contract clause over text while sitting in the front row at a charity gala. He did not reroute. Jordan managed the Morrow situation. Marcus Morrow was, as predicted, not going anywhere, having spent 18 months wanting what Thompson Capital had, and then sat at the sidewalk table watching through the glass as the two of them talked and talked and talked. Jordan was not sentimental about romance. Jordan had an efficiency-based relationship with most human phenomena. But Jordan could recognize a pivot point when one arrived, and that corner booth in Cherry's Cafe on a May Friday was one. When Kendrick finally came out, 2 hours and 11 minutes after going in, he was carrying a gold-edged card and had taken off his jacket, had laid it over his arm with the folded pocket square still perfect, and there was something looser about him. Not sloppy. Not diminished. Looser in the way of something that has been very precisely held in one position for a very long time and has just, briefly, chosen not to be. How'd Marcus take it? He asked. He rescheduled for Thursday without complaint. The supplemental analysis impressed him. Good. He looked at the card once more. Put it in his interior breast pocket, not the outer card pocket where business contacts went, Jordan noticed. The interior pocket. The personal one. I need flowers delivered to Eloquence Studios on Riverside by end of day. Yellow flowers. Any specific variety? Ask Shannon. Douglas. She's the best friend. She'll be at the studio. He paused. And find out who the Miami boutique buyer is that's been stringing her along on wholesale. I want a name. Jordan made a note. Any particular reason? Kendrick Thompson put his jacket back on, smoothed his lapel, and looked utterly composed and utterly determined. Because she should have had that deal last year, he said, and began walking. Part 2. The courtship. The real ones don't just show up. They show up and then they stay showing up. Chapter 4. The yellow flowers. Shannon Douglas was in the middle of telling Kendra that she needed therapy, a vacation, and a juice cleanse in that order when the delivery arrived. The delivery was not a small gesture. It was 40 yellow tulips, not roses, which said something, arranged in a vase the color of raw honey with a single card. Shannon held the card. Shannon read the card. Shannon looked at Kendra. He called me to find out your favorite flower. Kendra was very carefully not smiling. He mentioned he might send something. Kendra Renee Mitchell. He called me. He got my number from, how did he get my number? I may have mentioned your Instagram when we were talking about the boutique launch. This man, Shannon held the card with both hands like evidence. This man you met 4 hours ago called your best friend to find out your favorite flower, sent 40 of them, and wrote, she consulted the card, thank you for seeing me. Kendrick Thompson. She set the card down on the cutting table with precision. Not, thanks for the compliment. Not, nice meeting you. Thank you for seeing me. Shannon pointed at Kendra. You're in trouble. I am not in trouble. Deep, beautiful, designer dress wearing, locks flying in the wind trouble. Shannon pulled out her phone. I need to text Devin. Do not text Devin. Devin needs to know that his best friend is the kind of man who leads with yellow tulips. The phone on the cutting table buzzed. Kendra looked at it the way you look at something you already know. Kendrick, did they arrive? She typed back, they did. Tulips were exactly right. Kendrick, I had good intelligence. Kendra, Shannon says she needs immunity from whatever this is. Kendrick, tell her I respect her terms. Dinner? Tonight if you're free. Tomorrow if you need time. Saturday if you need to think about whether you should. She smiled at the screen. Kendra, tomorrow. Kendrick, tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something of yours. I want to see what you make when you're not making it for someone else. Shannon, reading over her shoulder with exactly zero shame, told you. Trouble. She wore the indigo. It was the piece she'd made 3 years ago and never offered for sale, the one she came back to when she needed to remember why she started. Hand-dyed linen, deep as a night sky above water, cut in a wrap silhouette that curved with her body the way the tide curves with the shore. She added gold earrings, hoops, thick, the kind that caught light and held it, and let her locks fall loose except for 2 strands pinned back above her right ear. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror in her studio apartment off Springfield and thought, yeah, that's right. He was at the door at exactly 7. Not 6:58 showing off his eagerness. Not 7:03 demonstrating the indifference of someone who made people wait. 7 exactly, which she would later understand was the Kendrick Thompson way, precise because he respected her time, not because he was performing precision. He was in a deep burgundy linen suit, and she actually laughed out loud at the door because they'd unintentionally coordinated. You called Shannon again, she said. I did not, he said, looking genuinely amused and equally delighted by the matching energy. I just knew indigo and burgundy are a conversation. They are. She stepped out, and he stepped back to give her room, not out of excessive courtesy, just out of the natural instinct of a man who understood that a woman stepping out of her own door deserves the full breadth of her entrance. Where are we going? A place I've wanted to take someone for a year. Kept waiting for the right occasion. She looked at him sideways as they walked to the car, a black G-Wagon, understated, no vanity plates. And I'm the right occasion? He opened her door, met her eyes over the frame. "You're the only occasion," he said simply, and closed it. Shannon Douglas, who had absolutely been parked down the street and was absolutely watching, sent Kendra a single text. "Shannon, oh, we in trouble, girl." Chapter 5. The View from the Water. He'd rented a private table on the deck of a waterfront restaurant she'd passed 100 times and never walked into, the kind of place that doesn't put its name in large letters outside because its clientele already knows where it is. The St. Johns River held the last of the sunset in its surface as they sat down, and the warm breath of Florida evening moved through the water hyacinths at the dock's edge. She was aware that this was luxury in the specific way that luxury is most effective: quiet, unhurried, arranged so that you feel seen rather than impressed. "Tell me about your parents," he said, after they'd ordered. She liked that. Most men waited to talk about themselves and endured your story as a mandatory toll. He moved toward hers like it was where he actually wanted to be. "Henry and Joyce Mitchell," she said. "Dad retired from the post office after 30 years. Mom runs the Sunday school at 2nd Corinthian and makes the best sweet potato pie in Duval County. She will fight anyone who says otherwise." "Do they know what you've built?" "They know I have a studio and they know I work hard," Kendra said. "The scale of it, they don't have a framework for it yet. Daddy still introduces me to his friends as my daughter, the seamstress." She said it without bitterness. It's not dismissive. It's just the word he has. "My father calls me a banker," Kendrick said, and she laughed. "James Thompson built a local investment firm for 25 years. Steady, respectable, community-facing. I took it and turned it into something he doesn't recognize and is deeply proud of in equal measure." He turned his wine glass. "He asked me last Christmas if I'd remembered to thank my clients with Christmas cards. Did you?" "I had Jordan send Tiffany frames." "Which is not what he asked." "Which is absolutely not what he asked." He smiled. "So I also sent cards. By hand." She looked at him. "You wrote cards by hand." 63 of them. "Took me a Sunday afternoon." Something in her chest moved, quiet and significant, like a piece of furniture being set in the right place after a long time in the wrong room. "Brenda and James," she said. "Savannah. Savannah born. Tampa now. Dad's semi-retired. Mom still runs her shop 3 days a week because she says if she stops she'll forget who she is." He paused. "She's going to want to meet you." Kendra raised an eyebrow. "We've been on a date for 45 minutes. "I know." He didn't seem embarrassed by it. "I'm just warning you so it's not a surprise when she calls your studio Monday morning and asks you what your grandmother's Sunday china pattern was." "Does she really?" "She absolutely does. She considers a woman's relationship with table setting to be a window into her soul." Kendra laughed. "My grandmother used the Blue Danube. I'll tell her. She'll approve." The food came: local fish with hearts of palm and a citrus mango preparation that made the Florida evening feel like the whole meal had been designed to match the moment. They ate without performing eating. He poured her water before she could reach for it, not with fanfare, just a reflexive attention to her comfort that she filed away. He filed things too. She could feel him cataloging, not consuming, cataloging the things she said and didn't say, the way she held her fork, the moment she went quiet looking at the river. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Not demanding. Just genuinely curious. "That I don't usually trust something that feels this easy," she said, which was more honest than she'd planned to be. He nodded slowly. "What does this easy feel like to you?" "Like it's either exactly right," she said, "or a very good imitation of it. And I can't always tell the difference in the first 48 hours. "What would you need," he said carefully, "to tell the difference?" She looked at him. He was not afraid of the question. He was asking it because he genuinely wanted the answer, because she could see this now, could see the shape of this man across the candlelit table. He had decided to get this right. Whatever it cost. However long it took. "Time," she said. "And for you to show up the same way in month 3 that you do tonight." "That's reasonable," he said. "Most men say, 'Of course,' or 'I promise,'" she observed. "I know." He lifted his glass. "I said it's reasonable because I think you should hold me to it. Not take my word for it. Watch." She touched her glass to his. The river held the last of the light. Chapter 6. The Studio Visit. He showed up to the studio the following Tuesday at noon with lunch from Cherry's. Cherry herself had called Kendra at 11 to say, with maximum innocence, that a man had come in and ordered a full spread and asked what she usually got, and Cherry had told him, and did not once behave like a man who was there to be impressed. He was there to understand. That was the difference Kendra felt from the first moment he walked through the door. Shannon, who was doing embroidery work at the back table and had precisely zero intention of leaving, watched from the corner as Kendrick moved through the studio slowly, looking at things with the careful attention of someone who didn't fake interest. He stopped at the lookbook wall, the full-length prints from the fall collection, 5 women, 5 neighborhoods, the images Kendra had fought a photographer to take the way she wanted them instead of the way magazine-trained eyes defaulted to. "You shot these at Talleyrand," he said. "By the port." "My grandmother's neighborhood," Kendra said. The city wants to call it historic now that it's being developed. 3 years ago they couldn't get the potholes filled. He looked at the images for a long moment. These should be in a gallery. These should be in the city they were made in, she corrected. A gallery is for later. This is now. He turned and looked at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize, that particular, focused attention that meant he was taking something in and keeping it. The benefit, he said. I want to restructure what I offered you. Shannon's embroidery needle paused. Instead of styling for the event, he continued, I want to commission a capsule collection. 4 to 6 pieces, Thompson Foundation event, full attribution. Your name in the program. Photo documentation owned by Hood Eloquence. If any guests ask to purchase, we facilitate direct to you at retail. He paused. And I want to use the event as the launch of a partnership conversation. I have a foundation board member who chairs a retail development initiative. I'd like to introduce you formally. Kendra was quiet for a moment. This is more than you offered at Cherry's. I've had 5 days to think about what you deserve, he said, without making it land like a line. It landed like a fact. The Cherry's offer was instinct. This is research. Shannon made a sound from the back of the studio that might have been embroidery related and was absolutely not. Send me the formal terms in writing, Kendra said. I'll have my attorney review by Friday. I'd expect nothing less. He glanced toward the lunch he'd set on her cutting table. Can we eat now? Cherry sent the mango slaw and I've been thinking about it since I ordered. Kendra Mitchell almost smiled completely before catching herself. Yeah, she said. We can eat. Part 3. Convincing her. Trust is not given. It is built slowly by people who know it is worth the labor. Chapter 7. What Joyce saw. Joyce Mitchell saw the G-Wagon from the kitchen window and said to Henry, who was reading the newspaper with the deliberate peace of a retired man, there's a man outside. Henry turned a page. What kind of man? The kind that parks before he gets out. Henry looked up. There was a parking etiquette that Joyce Mitchell had observed for 40 years. Men who pulled up and jumped out were in a hurry or showing off. Men who parked, sat for a moment, and then got out had thought about what they were walking into. The first kind treated every arrival like a transaction. The second kind treated it like a commitment. Kendra had called ahead. She'd said she was bringing someone for Sunday dinner. She had not said much else, which Joyce had filed alongside her knowledge that Kendra only brought people to the house when they'd earned it. The doorbell rang. Joyce opened it and found Kendrick Thompson on her porch with flowers, not for Kendra. She registered immediately, because Kendra was standing beside him and these were pointed at Joyce and a Sunday-ready pressed linen shirt, no jacket, appropriate. He'd understood it was a home, not a presentation, and an expression that was respectful without being obsequious. Mrs. Mitchell, he said. I'm Kendrick. I brought dahlias because Kendra mentioned they're your garden flower. Joyce took the dahlias. Come in, she said. Henry, come see Kendra's company. Henry Mitchell sized up a man the way he'd sized up 30 years of mail routes, efficiently and without sentimentality. He shook Kendrick's hand, firm, direct, held for the right amount of time, and said, You're from Tampa. Originally Savannah. Tampa for the last 8 years. What do you do in Tampa? Investment advisory. I run Thompson Capital. Henry absorbed this. James Thompson's boy. Kendrick stilled slightly. You knew my father? Knew of him. We had a mutual friend at the credit union years back. Good man, your father. Built something honest. Henry settled back in his chair. Sit down. Joyce will be loud about the food being ready before it's ready, and then it'll be ready. From the kitchen. I heard that. Henry James Mitchell. You were supposed to, Henry said, without raising his voice. Kendrick smiled, a real one, unguarded, and Kendra watched it happen and thought, okay. Sunday dinner at the Mitchells was collard greens cooked down with smoked turkey, candied yams from a recipe Joyce had received from her own mother and would not write down for anyone. Fried catfish that Henry had caught himself and cleaned with the practiced ease of a man who'd been doing it since boyhood, and cornbread from a cast-iron skillet that came out of the oven golden and borderline perfect. Kendrick ate like someone who'd been raised to understand that accepting food from someone's kitchen was an act of intimacy and deserved full presence. He asked Henry about the fishing. He asked Joyce about the dahlias, specifically, which cultivars, and whether she direct-seeded or started them inside, and when Joyce answered with increasing animation, Kendra caught her father's eye across the table. Henry gave her the smallest, most deliberate nod she'd ever seen him give. It meant, this one did his research. It meant, I see that. Chapter 8. The Real Conversation. 3 weeks in, Shannon called a formal meeting. The venue was Shannon's apartment, which meant her kitchen table, which meant the good candles were out and she'd made a full pot of chamomile, and there were 2 kinds of pie because Shannon Douglas processed complex emotions through the production of baked goods. I need to ask you something and I need you not to give me the Kendra answer, Shannon began. What's the Kendra answer? The answer that makes you sound like you have it all together and aren't feeling anything that scares you. Shannon cut the pie. The real answer. How do you feel about him? Kendra was quiet for a moment. Like, I'm standing at the edge of something, she finally said. And the edge isn't a cliff. It's more like the edge of a pool I've wanted to swim in for a long time. And I'm not scared of the water. I'm scared of wanting it this much and then finding out it's shallow. Shannon nodded slowly. Is there anything he's done that makes you think it's shallow? Kendra went through it, not performing the list for Shannon, actually examining it herself. The yellow tulips. The research. The way he talked about his parents. Sunday dinner. The contract terms, which her attorney Diane had called genuinely favorable in the extreme, and what is happening with your life right now, Kendra. The calls he made, not texts, actual calls, at consistent times that proved he was building a rhythm with her rather than reacting to her. The night 3 days ago when she'd been in the studio at midnight catastrophizing about the Henderson custom order, and he'd called and stayed on the phone for 2 hours while she worked, not talking much, just there. A warm presence in her ear while her hands did what they needed to do. No, she said. Nothing shallow. I keep looking and finding more depth. Then what's the actual fear? Kendra looked at her pie. That I chose this, she said. That I started it. I called out across the street and put this whole thing into motion, and if it goes wrong, that's on me. Shannon was quiet for a moment. Then, baby girl. If it goes right, that's also on you. Kendra looked up. You saw a good man and you said so, Shannon continued. You opened the door. Everything that came through it is because you were brave enough to say something. She pointed with her fork. Don't be scared of what your own courage created. Own it. Kendra's phone buzzed on the table. Kendrick, are you at Shannon's? Devin just told me Shannon makes pie when she's staging an intervention. Tell her the chess pie is her best work. Shannon grabbed the phone. Read it. Looked at Kendra. Devin, Kendra said. Devin, Shannon confirmed. Then into the phone, because she typed back without asking. Shannon, the chess pie respects itself and so do I. Your boy better act right. Kendrick, he is trying his level best. Shannon handed the phone back. Okay, she said. I like him. Chapter 9. Tampa. He took her to Tampa on a Thursday. Not for the benefit, that was still 2 weeks out. He took her on a Thursday because he wanted to show her his world the way she'd let him into hers, fully, without performance. His office was on the 28th floor of a building in the Channelside district, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the bay. The space was extraordinary and she told him so, and then she told him the art choices were conservative and he should commission a local muralist, and he said, I know, which meant he'd already been thinking it. He took her to the Riverwalk in the afternoon and they walked the length of it the way people do in cities when they want to feel the city rather than visit it. He bought her elotes from a cart near the Amalie Arena, and they ate them standing at the water's edge, and she got lime juice on the sleeve of her wrap and did not care at all. He introduced her to Devin Lee at a restaurant in Hyde Park Village that evening. Devin was shorter than Kendrick by 4 inches and broader in the personality by about 4 miles. And he arrived 10 minutes late with 2 apologies and 1 unapologetic acknowledgement that he'd been watching them from the bar for 5 minutes, deciding if Kendrick seemed nervous. Does he? Kendra asked. He does, Devin said, settling in with the comfort of a man who knew he had immunity. And he hasn't been nervous about a woman since sophomore year of college. Which is notable. Devin, Kendrick said. What happened sophomore year? Kendra asked Devin. A woman named Aaliyah from the economics department who? Devin. Who he studied with for an entire semester before asking her to. Devin Lee, I will restructure your portfolio. Dinner. Just dinner. And she said yes, and they dated for 6 months and it was fine, but she eventually told him he was too focused and Devin stopped. Looked at Kendra. Huh. What? Kendra said. Nothing, Devin said, with the expression of a man who just understood something. Just nothing. He picked up his menu. So, Kendra, I hear you're building something real. And they were off, she and Devin, who turned out to have grown up 4 miles from her grandmother's Talleyrand house, whose mother had gone to the same church as Joyce Mitchell, who had the same hot and specific love of Jacksonville that she carried in her marrow like geography as identity. Kendrick sat across from her and watched her light up and did not try to manage the conversation or bring it back to him. He ate his food and let her be magnificent. Walking back to the hotel that night, she had her own room. She had insisted, and he had not argued, she said. You knew Devin would do that. Do what? Make me feel like I belonged in your world before I decided if I wanted to be. He stopped walking. Turned to her. You already belonged, he said. I just wanted you to feel it. The Tampa night was warm and the bay was close and somewhere there was music and the orange glow of streetlights. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she took his hand. For the first time. He looked down at their joined hands with an expression she had not seen on him before, something that was not cool, not composed, not the precisely held attention of a man who moves through the world knowing he has the advantage. Something younger. Something almost undone. Okay, he said quietly, to himself or to her or to the night, she wasn't sure which. She squeezed his hand once. They walked back to the hotel like that. Part 4. The gift. Love, when it is right, does not diminish you. It finds you already whole and asks to build beside you. Chapter 10. The boutique call. Kendra was in the middle of a fitting when her phone rang with a Miami area code she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. Then she remembered that she always answered Miami numbers now because something was shifting in her business life with the same quiet momentum as something was shifting in her personal life, and the two felt connected in a way she didn't fully understand yet. This is Kendra Mitchell. Kendra, this is Yolanda James from Mosaic Boutique. I know we've been in conversations for a while and I'm calling today because we'd like to formalize a wholesale agreement for the spring collection. Kendra stood very still in the middle of her studio. The Henderson fitting client said, "Everything okay?" "Give me 2 minutes," Kendra said, and stepped into the back room and closed the door and leaned against the wall and said, very quietly, "Yolanda, can you repeat the terms you're proposing?" The terms were good. Genuinely, substantially good. She said she'd have her attorney follow up by Monday. She said thank you with the steady, professional warmth she used for all business calls that were also secretly making her want to cry. She called Kendrick from the back room. "Mosaic called," she said, when he picked up. A pause. Then, "Yolanda James? What did you do?" Her voice was quiet. "I introduced a mutual connection to her work," he said carefully. "I did not call in a favor. I did not leverage anything. I showed her a deck of your lookbook images and your production numbers and your social metrics and your website traffic from the last 12 months and told her this was one of the best independent brands working in Southern fashion and that whoever got to her first was going to be right." A pause. She made the call on her own. "The work is yours, Kendra. I just made sure the right person saw it." She was quiet for a moment. "You put together a deck. Jordan may have helped with the formatting." Kendrick. "Yes. Thank you," she said. Not performing gratitude. Meaning it. "Thank you for doing it the right way." "There's no other way," he said simply. "Your work is excellent." Someone should have said so loudly a long time ago. I'm just the man who got to say it. She pressed the phone to her collarbone for a moment after they hung up. Then she went back out and finished the fitting with her hands absolutely steady and her heart doing something it would take her another week to name. Chapter 11. The benefit. The Thompson Foundation benefit was held at a renovated historic building in Tampa's Ybor City district, exposed brick and soaring ceilings and warm Edison lighting that made everyone in the room look like a portrait. 250 guests moved through the space with the particular energy of people who knew they were attending something meaningful. 6 of them were wearing hood Eloquence. Kendrick wore a midnight black suit with subtle cream pinstripes and a pocket square in the exact burnt orange of Kendra's fall book. She had constructed it from the same linen as her signature collection and delivered it with no ceremony, just a garment bag and a handwritten note that said, "This is what I see when I look at you. Don't change a thing." He had read that note 3 times before getting dressed. She was wearing the new piece, the one she'd built for this night specifically, a column of deep champagne silk that moved like a second skin and had a single panel of hand-embroidered beadwork at the shoulder that took her 11 evenings to complete. She'd done her locks in an updo with gold pins, and she stood in the entrance hall of the venue accepting a glass of water from a passing server and looking like exactly who she was, the most talented person in any room she chose to enter. Kendrick saw her from across the room. He excused himself from a conversation with 3 board members without explanation. "You made that tonight," he said, when he reached her. "This morning, technically. I was up at 5. Kendra." He stepped back slightly to look at her, not ogling, assessing, the way a man who understood cloth understood what she'd done. "This is extraordinary." The event brief said champagne and ivory, she said, keeping her voice professionally steady because his face was doing something that made her want to be less composed than she intended. "I reworked the color family. The event brief should be grateful." He offered his arm. "There are some people I need you to meet." The Thompson Foundation board member was a woman named Dr. Sandra Monroe who ran the Retail Development Initiative and had the businesslike warmth of someone who'd spent 20 years being the most prepared person in the room. She looked at Kendra's dress for 30 seconds before she said anything. Then, "Where are you distributed?" "Currently building toward Mosaic Boutique in Miami as of next season. Direct to consumer online. Trunk shows in Jacksonville and Atlanta. Southeast only? For now." "I have a conversation I'd like to have with you," Dr. Monroe said, with the precision of someone who did not say things she didn't mean. "Not tonight. Next week. My office in Atlanta." She looked at Kendrick. "Your timing, as usual, is obnoxious." "I prefer accurate," Kendrick said. "He does this," Dr. Monroe told Kendra. "Shows up with the exactly right thing at the exactly right moment and pretends it's a coincidence." "I'm learning that," Kendra said. Dr. Monroe smiled at her with real warmth. "Good. Don't let him off the hook for it." Late in the evening, after the speeches and the dinner and the scholarship announcements, 3 students from 3 HBCUs, each one reading their names from the podium like they were tasting something they'd been hungry for, Kendrick found her at the edge of the room near the bar, looking at the crowd. 3 of those scholarship students, she said quietly. The girl in the middle. That yellow dress. Amara Douglas. Pre-med Spelman. Jacksonville born. Kendra looked at him. Does she know you're from Jacksonville connections? She knows the foundation supported her. She doesn't know the specifics. He was quiet for a moment. My mother grew up without. I grew up comfortable because my father built something. But I've never forgotten what without looks like when you're standing beside someone who has it and you don't. He watched the young woman across the room. These scholarships aren't charity. They're debt. She looked at him, this man, this whole, serious, beautifully dressed man with his foundation and his foundation board and his father's work in his hands and his mother's eye for detail in his blood, and she thought, there you are. There's the real version. Not the suit. Not the watch. Not the G-Wagon or the Tampa skyline or the $10 million contract. This. She turned toward him. Kendrick. Yes. I'm done waiting to see if month 3 looks like tonight. He turned to face her fully. Because this is who you are, she said. Not a performance of who you are. The actual person. She held his gaze. And I need you to know that I see it. The same way I saw the suit across the street, but she touched his chest, briefly, over his heart deeper. Kendrick Thompson, who had negotiated contracts in 4 countries and sat across from some of the sharpest minds in American finance, and had never once in his adult life not known exactly what to say. Said nothing. Just covered her hand with his. And held it there. Part 5. Building forever. The extraordinary thing is not finding someone who loves you. It is finding someone who loves you like you deserve. Chapter 12. Morning in the studio. 3 months after the benefit, Kendra's studio had a second sewing machine, a Juki industrial she'd been wanting for 2 years, and a new intern from FSCJ's fashion program, and a standing wholesale order from Mosaic that had led to a second boutique inquiry from a shop in Savannah. Brenda Thompson had called the studio on a Monday morning exactly as Kendrick had predicted and had asked about Sunday China and had also asked about Kendra's grandmother's church affiliation and had said, after approximately 45 minutes of the most thorough and pleasant cross-examination Kendra had experienced since grad school, I'm glad my son has sense. Kendra had hung up and called Kendrick immediately. Your mother is something else. She is, he said, with the profound pride and mild terror of a man who fully understood what he'd grown up with. She liked you. How do you know? She called me after and said, that girl is serious. Don't you dare waste serious. Kendra laughed. I have no intention of wasting serious, he said, and she heard something under the lightness that was not light at all. He was at the studio often enough now that John Henry, her landlord, who had the building superintendent's omniscience about human behavior, had asked her in the parking lot one Wednesday, the man with the good shoes, he with you? He is. John Henry considered this. He was 72 and had been widowed for 6 years and noticed things about people the way a man does when he's been paying attention to the love in his building for 2 decades. He parked careful, John Henry said. Pulled in, adjusted, made sure he wasn't taking somebody else's space. That's a man that minds about other people. He nodded once. Good. Kendra filed it alongside Henry's nod at Sunday dinner. The men in her life were building a dossier without knowing they were in communication. The night he stayed. She would remember it as ordinary in the most extraordinary way. They'd been at the studio late, she was finishing the mock-up for the Atlanta retail development meeting, and he was at the drafting table she'd let him claim, reviewing something on his laptop. Both of them working in the comfortable parallel of 2 people who'd found the frequency where they could simply exist together. Somewhere past 11, he looked up and said, you should eat something. I have almonds. Kendra. And a protein bar. I will order food. Everything's closed. Cherry's closes at midnight on Fridays, and she makes a ropa vieja that I have had 3 times, and it is, she will not tell me the recipe, and I have accepted this. Kendra looked up from her pattern. Cherry makes ropa vieja? Her grandmother was from Cuba. It is a revelation. They ended up with Cherry's ropa vieja and rice, eating at the cutting table with the music on low and the studio warm, and the work not finished but resting. And at some point the talking slowed into the comfortable silence of people who'd stopped performing for each other. He fell asleep first, head tilted back on the studio couch she kept for long session days. She looked at him. 6 feet of copper-tone man in an untucked Oxford and sock feet because he'd slipped off his loafers an hour ago, asleep with the specific total surrender of someone who felt entirely safe. She got the blanket from the storage shelf. She covered him. Then she sat back at her table and worked for another hour, and the whole studio felt like the inside of something she'd been building her whole life, without knowing she was building it. Chapter 13. What he gave her. He gave her things the way he did everything, with research and intention and 0 performance. The first was a book, a first-edition copy of a memoir by a black fashion designer from the 1960s whose name Kendra knew and whose work she'd studied and who existed in most fashion histories as a footnote in someone else's chapter. He'd found it at a specialty bookseller in New York. There was no card. Just her name written inside the front cover in his handwriting and beneath it, because her name deserves to be said out loud. The second was a conversation. He'd asked, 3 months in, if she'd be willing to talk to the Foundation's HBCU scholarship students as part of a speaker series on entrepreneurship. Not a favor. A genuine invitation, her name, her bio, her work, presented as the main event. She'd said yes before he finished asking and had delivered a 90-minute talk in a conference room in Tampa that the program director had called the best we've had in 4 years. And that had made 2 students cry and one of them come up afterward to say they were switching their major to fashion design. The third was a trip. Where are we going? She asked at the airport. Savannah, he said. My mother is hosting a dinner and she would like you to come, and she has been extremely patient about not demanding this sooner, and I'd like to honor that patience before it runs out. Kendra laughed. You're taking me to meet your mother. I am. She knows about you. She has for 2 months. She would like to know you in person. He picked up her carry-on. She's also prepared to discuss the Blue Danube pattern in depth, which I'm told will be a full 20 minutes. I have opinions about the Blue Danube. Brenda Thompson will be thrilled. Brenda Thompson's house was a craftsman bungalow in the Ardsley Park neighborhood with a front garden that bloomed with the specificity of a woman who gardened as a spiritual practice. She opened the door before they'd finished the walk up, and she was shorter than Kendra had imagined, compact and warm and commanding in the way of women who've spent their lives making the people around them feel held. She looked at Kendra for one long moment. Then she said, your grandmother had good taste in China. And she opened her arms. Kendra walked into the hug and felt something she hadn't realized she'd been missing, the specific comfort of a mother welcoming you home to something you haven't lived in yet, but already know is yours. Over Brenda's shoulder, she caught Kendrick's face. He was not trying to look composed. He was just watching the two of them, and he looked like a man who had just gotten exactly the thing he'd been quietly, patiently, completely without doubt working toward for months. Chapter 14. The Conversation. They had the conversation on a Sunday in October, on the porch of the Savannah house, after dinner, while James Thompson was inside losing a chess match to Henry Mitchell. The two fathers had met for the first time that afternoon and had immediately begun a competitive friendship that Brenda had predicted would involve monthly fishing trips within 3 months. The evening was cooling. Savannah in October was the best version of the South, warm enough still to sit outside, but carrying the first whisper of the season turning. I want to talk to you about something, Kendrick said. Kendra turned her tea glass in her hands. Okay. I'm not going to be dramatic about this, he said, which was how he began things he felt very seriously about. I know what I want. I've known for a while. I'm going to say it clearly, and I want you to receive it clearly. Say it. I want to build something with you. Not, he paused, choosing words with the care of a man who knew the difference between the right ones and the almost right ones, not just the relationship. I want to watch Hood Eloquence become what it's going to become, and I want to be the man in your corner when it does. I want Sunday dinners that alternate between Jacksonville and Savannah. I want the studio to need a bigger space by next year. I want, he turned to look at her, to be the person you call at midnight when you're catastrophizing about the Henderson order. You already are that. I know, he said. I want to be that officially. Permanently. On a timeline that makes sense for you. He held her gaze. I am not rushing you. I'm just being clear about where I'm pointing so you're not surprised when I get there. The porch was quiet. Inside, someone won a chess game and someone disputed it. Kendra looked at this man, the man she'd seen across the street and complimented because she was herself, and being herself had always been her most dangerous and most reliable gift. And she thought about yellow tulips and the Blue Danube pattern and 90 minutes talking to scholarship students and the Juki Industrial and 43 emails and a blanket pulled over sleeping shoulders. Kendrick. Yes. I'm pointing the same direction. She held his gaze. I just needed to make sure you knew where we were going before I said so. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I've known where we're going since you called me Tom Ford across the street. She shook her head, smiling. You did not. I had a strong feeling. A strong feeling does not constitute knowing. It does when the feeling is that specific. He turned toward her on the porch swing, fully, and the evening light did something beautiful to his face, and she let herself look. I will tell you exactly what I felt standing on that curb. I felt like I was about to have the most important conversation of my life. I did not know it would last this long or go this deep, but I knew it was important. And Jordan knew. Jordan literally wrote it down. Jordan wrote it. Immediately deleted it. Professional standards. But it was written. She laughed, and the sound of it went out into the October Savannah evening, and the trees held it for a moment. He took her hand. The same way she'd taken his, that first night in Tampa. Deliberate. Without theater. Okay, Tom Ford, she said softly. Okay, Kendra Mitchell. Inside the house, their fathers were arguing cheerfully about chess, and their mothers had migrated to the kitchen to argue cheerfully about sweet potato pie, and the evening wrapped around the porch like a promise the whole world was making at once. Chapter 15. What comes next? The Atlanta meeting with Dr. Monroe resulted in a regional retail partnership that put Hood Eloquence in 4 boutiques across Georgia, Florida, and Tennessee. Kendra hired Shannon as creative director in February. She did not ask Kendrick for a single dollar of it. He didn't offer. Not because he didn't want to help, but because he understood the difference between supporting someone and funding them into a corner. What he did, he showed up to the Atlanta meeting and sat in the chair beside hers and did not say a word unless directly addressed, because it was her table and he was there as presence, not performance. Dr. Monroe noticed. She mentioned it afterward to Brenda Thompson, who mentioned it to James Thompson, who mentioned it to Henry Mitchell over the phone, and Henry Mitchell said, "He's been showing up right from the beginning." Jerry Joseph watched them come in for breakfast on a Saturday in March, the 5-month mark, though neither of them was counting in that way anymore, because you stop counting when something has stopped being new and started being yours. They sat in the corner booth. They ordered without menus. Kendra had a new design notebook open on the table and was showing him something, and he was looking at it with his full attention. Not the polite attention of a man indulging a partner's interest, but the real attention of a man who had learned the language of what she made, because he decided the language was worth knowing. She said something and he laughed, and it was the real version of the laugh, not the managed, professionally appropriate laugh she'd heard in his meeting voice, but the one that got away from him a little, the one that went up at the end. "Deja, from the counter. Miss Cherry. Those two. He's going to propose." Cherry poured 2 cups of coffee without looking up. "He already knows how. He's just waiting for the moment to find him." "How do you know?" "Because he's been practicing patience since the first day they sat here." Cherry set the cups on the tray. "That kind of patience has a destination. This is it." She picked up the tray. "Go check on table 5. He proposed in the studio. Not at the restaurant with the river view, not in Savannah, not on a mountaintop or a rooftop or in front of anyone. In the studio, on a Tuesday evening, when she was at the cutting table, and he was doing what he'd taken to doing on Tuesday evenings, which was sitting on the studio couch reading. Because he decided if she was going to stay late on Tuesdays then he was going to be there, and they'd built a whole Tuesday language around it. She was marking a pattern and not looking up when she heard him stand. She looked up. He was standing in the middle of the studio floor, no jacket, sleeves rolled to the elbow, the lamplight doing everything it could for a man it already had a lot to work with, and he had a small box in his hand and an expression that was not composed at all. He was, for the first and completely wonderful time she'd ever witnessed, nervous. "I was going to do this somewhere significant," he said. "I planned 3 different locations. Jordan helped me research all 3. She set down her marking pencil. "But everywhere I imagined doing this," he continued, "I kept imagining you here. In this room. Because this room is who you are. This is where you make things." He looked at her steadily. "And I want to spend my life watching you make things. I want to be in this room on Tuesdays. I want your parents at my parents' table at Thanksgiving. I want to commission a mural for my office from someone you recommend, because you were right about the art and you're usually right and I've accepted this." Something moved across his face, tender and certain and entirely unhidden. "I want to be the man you called Tom Ford across the street, forever. The man you saw before I saw you." He opened the box. The ring was not what she would have expected from a man of his means, not a spectacle, not a statement. It was a champagne diamond, deep and warm as evening light on water, set in a band of twisted gold that echoed the texture of the thread crown in her logo. He'd had it made. Specifically for her. "Kendra Renee Mitchell," he said. "Will you marry me?" Not a question. An arrival. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. She thought about a compliment called across the street on a May Friday and yellow tulips and a Sunday dinner and a chess game in Savannah and 63 handwritten Christmas cards and a first edition book and a blanket over sleeping shoulders. She thought, "I started this. I opened this door. And look what came through it." "Yes," she said, and her voice was even, and her eyes were bright, and she crossed the studio to him like every step was landing exactly where she'd meant to put it. "Yes. Yes. Obviously yes." He put the ring on her finger. And then she was in his arms, his whole, warm, ridiculous, perfectly dressed arms. And the studio held them, and the Florida night pressed soft against the windows, and somewhere in the city, the river was still running, and Cherry's was closing, and Shannon Douglas was about to get the call of her life, and Joyce Mitchell was going to cry, and Henry Mitchell was going to say he'd seen it coming since the parking thing, and Brenda Thompson was going to say she'd known from the China. And Jordan Williams, who had not been informed that tonight was the night, received a text at 9:47 p.m. that said simply, "She said yes." Jordan sat with that for a moment. Then typed back, "I told you she was different, sir." Then deleted it. Professional standards. Then sent it anyway. Epilogue. The thing about compliments. The wedding was in October. Jacksonville. 2 Corinthian, where Joyce Mitchell had run the Sunday school for 20 years, filled to its 100-year-old rafters with people who loved them. Kendra wore a gown of her own making, ivory silk organza with hand-beaded detailing at the bodice, a train that moved like a full breath, and a crown of locks adorned with champagne pins and tiny woven threads of gold. She had started the design the week after the proposal and finished it the night before the wedding, which Shannon had called a catastrophe and Kendra had called a creative process, and which had resulted in the most extraordinary garment she'd ever made. Kendrick wore navy. Of course he wore navy. The suit was a deep midnight shade with a silk lapel and a pocket square in the orange violet of her first dress, the sunset dress she'd been wearing the day they met. Cherry had been consulted on the color and had said nothing except hum with the satisfaction of a woman who had seen it first. Henry Mitchell walked his daughter down the aisle with the steady, unhurried step of a man delivering something precious. At the end of the aisle, Kendrick Thompson stood with Devin Lee at his shoulder and Brenda Thompson in the front row and James Thompson beside her, trying very hard not to cry. Henry stopped, shook Kendrick's hand, said something only Kendrick could hear. Later, Kendrick would tell Kendra that her father had said, "You know what she did to get here. Make sure you always know that." He had said, "I know. I've known since the street." Henry had nodded and let go of his daughter's hand and gone to sit beside Joyce, who was already crying and not remotely apologizing for it. At the reception, a celebration held in a renovated warehouse in Springfield, the neighborhood where Kendra had grown up, decorated with her own fabric designs hung like banners, food from Cherry's kitchen and 2 Savannah caterers that Brenda had insisted on, music from a live band that Devin had hired and Kendra had not vetoed because Devin's musical taste was the one thing she trusted without research. At some point late in the evening, when the dancing had been going on long enough that shoes had been removed by approximately half the room, Kendra found herself at the edge of the floor with Cherry Joseph beside her. "You know," Cherry said, watching the room, "most people spend their whole lives being too careful to say something when they see something beautiful." Kendra looked at her. "You weren't careful," Cherry said simply. "You opened your mouth. And look." Across the room, Kendrick was dancing with Brenda. His mother had gotten her own song. She had specifically requested it, and he was leading her through it with the patient, loving attentiveness of a man who understood exactly who he came from. Shannon was somewhere in the middle of the floor with Devin, both of them aggressively competitive about who was the better dancer. Henry and Joyce were slow dancing near the edge, Henry's hand at her back, her head against his shoulder, 36 years of marriage moving as a single shape. John Henry was at the bar, talking to James Thompson about fishing. Jordan Williams was at a table with a notebook, managing something and also smiling. "Yeah," Kendra said. She looked at all of it, this whole, full, loud and warm and alive thing that had started with 3 words called across a Jacksonville street on a Friday in May. "Yeah," she said again. Kendrick looked up from across the room. Found her. The way he always found her, without searching, like she was simply where he was already looking. He smiled. The slow one. The complete one. She smiled back with the full, wide, take it or leave it smile that her father said she came out of the womb with. He excused himself from his mother with a kiss on her cheek and crossed the floor. Cherry Joseph picked up her glass and went to find James Thompson and tell him his boy had done all right. The thing about a compliment. It is not the first word of a conversation. It is a door. And the brave ones walk through. The end. Hood Eloquence. Where the streets meet the literature. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.